This is Module 7, Lab 6A. We're going to do a Tomcat credential brute force. So we've seen services that might exist on a system, services not being patched and therefore leaving things that have been discovered as vulnerabilities that we can exploit to gain access to the workstation or server. Think about it this way. What about applications that are sitting on a workstation or a server and they are not configured properly? They're just poorly set up. As an example, Tomcat. What about default credentials left? It's not very good. It's not a good practice. So we'll see what our admins actually did here on these workstations that they provided for us. We're going to want to use our Kali Linux attack system for this one. We must be in a host-only environment. As you can see, I am here. If not, change it. We can power that one on. We're also going to want to come down here and we're going to power on our easy peasy system for this. And I'm going to say OK, let that one power up. Your messages might differ. It depends on what hardware you have attached to your workstation. And that VMware player is trying to gain access to that particular hardware. Go ahead and log in to your attack system once it finishes. Let's get here to a desktop. And we're not going to rely on our initial nmaps and initial Nessus scans for this one here. We're going to treat this a little bit different. We're going to start up a terminal, and first thing we need to discover is what is our IP address. I want to know what block I'm sitting on. Well, I'm on the 192.168.40.0 network, and on that network I am host 131. Let's go ahead and run an nmap scan of this entire block. Again, you're going to have to run the scan on the network that is on your system. Let's add a switch in the front here. We're going to do a TCP scan. The /24 signifies that we're going to run it on this entire Class C network. This is the network that we're actually running it on. Let's hit enter. Remember, nmap scans for a TCP connect scan shouldn't take too long. We're just going to try to initiate that three-way handshake and create a connection with ports. If we succeed, great, we're going to document it. If not, we're going to document it as closed. If you want to know where you are in the scan, hit your space bar. I'll wait till this finishes and come back. So my scan is finished here, 34 seconds, didn't take very long. Remember, we're going to have some different addresses in here. 131 is us. 254 is one of those VMware devices, and we're going to have a .1 up here, which is another VMware device. This is the one of interest. This is 130. It's going to be this guy over here. And what we found when we did this is that 192.168.40.130 port 80 is accepting HTTP connections. Wow. Okay. Well, that's good to know. So maybe that means that we can actually open a web page up if we try to connect to it. So we'll do an HTTP ://192.168.40.130. Because it's HTTP, we are connecting to a port 80, and there we go. Got some cool little tools in here if you want to play around with some different things. Let's go ahead and you might notice a little information right there. If you haven't been discovering these, there are little hidden bonus points throughout the class through different modules. You might link in the different areas where you're going to find some little things where you have code words to supply back to me and you get some bonus points. I know we're late in the class and I haven't been telling you about it because I just want you to discover and explore on your own and see what you get. But we can see that we actually have something responding back here. Alright, so there is a web page running. What's the service that's actually going to be hosting that web page? Something has to be running for that web page to be established and created. Well, we do have some other items in here that we're not quite sure what all of them are. 8180, that normally is a 8080, 8180. Those are kind of used at different times for different web services, but we need to discover what exactly that is. So we're going to come back and run an nmap one more time. we do not have to specify this entire range. We're going to do just to the .130 device, but we want a version of the different services that are running on this system. I'm going to pause and come right back when this is done. So this is finished, and if we look back here, check this out. We found out that 8180 is actually an HTTP service. You recall that up here on port 80 we had an HTTP service. So what we're going to try to do now is discover what exactly these go to. Let's see if we have this in our list here. Now let's go back and reconnect. http://192.168.4130, but now do a colon 8180. We're going to create that socket right there to say, you know what, I know what we normally connect to it, but that's the port I want you to try now using that protocol. Check this out. So we've discovered that some system on the network that we're connected to is listening for HTTP requests on 8180, and it just happens to take us to an Apache configuration page for Tomcat. We click on, oh, Tomcat Manager, check that out. Username and password. Okay, so it takes us to a login page. That's really, really interesting. I think what we're going to want to do, we can sit here and we can try to guess some things, but let's say the admin has something set up here for unsuccessful logins, alerting them to say, hey, this address is trying to connect to your server on the 8180 port using bad credentials. Let's not alert anybody. We found it. We can just try to see how poorly configured this is. Let's come over here and start up our Metasploit. So we're going to start the service PostgreSQL. We're also going to start our Metasploit service here, service Metasploit start. And now let's start our MSF console. Alright, so Metasploit is loaded. Let's go ahead and search for Tomcat. Got a lot of different options underneath here. And you notice there's a Tomcat administration tool default access. Okay, that one sounds pretty cool. We did see that back there. The one we're actually going to try to take advantage of is this application manager login utility. If we're not sure if that's the one we want, we do have the option of typing in info, and let's go ahead and search it out. This is an auxiliary module. So we got auxiliary, scanner, HTTP, Tomcat, manager, login, and go ahead and hit enter. Now when you type in info and you follow it by an exploit or an auxiliary, you're going to come up with some information around that. And this tells you exactly what you can set to test for. Blank passwords, brute force, how fast do you want to brute force so that you try not to alert or lock the system out. Passwords, is there a password file you want to try to use? Maybe you discovered some information about these administrators on some of their other systems that you think you might want to try. You also have a default text that's built which has all of the default passwords for different versions of Apache Tomcat, how they're set when they are initially installed. You do need to set an RHOST because it wants to know the target address. You do have to set a port. Once you have success, do you want it to stop or do you want it to keep guessing more credentials? Do you want to specify a specific username? Is there a username past text file that you want to use? Lots and lots of different options underneath here, but that's what your info is going to get you. Well, I think we have what we need. We're going to go ahead and use this auxiliary, scanner, HTTP, Tomcat, MGR, login. Go ahead and hit enter. What's the first thing we need to check? Let's show our options. Now this isn't as easy to read as the other, but you're working with the same thing. We're going to set about 5 different options here. One of the first ones we need to set is the R host. Who are we connecting to? Well, it's going to be back to 192.168. For me, it's 40.130. You make sure that it is who it's supposed to be for you. Just to confirm, if you need to, you can run your ifconfig. You can always go up and check your scan that we did, but this guy is 130, and I think there was this guy's 131. I think there was a 130 that exists. There we go. So we're going to set our R host as that 130 address. We're also going to set our port, and if you remember, it was specified when we did our nmap scan, our version scan, that the port was 8180. So we will specify that. If you look back up here, the default port is 8080. So it tells us, hey, they did actually adjust the port. Let's see if they changed the credentials too. We're going to set the threads to about 50. The threads basically indicate the number of concurrent attempts against the host that we're attempting. We are also going to set a brute force speed of about 3. Typo. Outside of our brute force speed, we will set stop on success to yes. Once we have all of that set up, we can come back and show our options one more time so we can see exactly what we have configured for this go around. You'll see we have our brute force speed is changed to 3. And I'm glad we came back and checked this, because our hosts with an S, because you can run this on multiple addresses. So it's our hosts with a S on the end. 192.168. 40.130. I'm glad you guys are seeing some of these little small errors you can make, because this will completely change what happens if it's not done properly. Now let's go back and check again. You see we have our hosts options actually set now. Our port was changed to 8180. We've changed stop on success to yes. And I think we are good to go. Go ahead and type run and hit enter. And here's what's happening. Each one of these, well, let's wait till it stops. I'll show you what we got going on here. Shouldn't take too long. You can see that it's 55 potential credentials it's going to try, combinations. We're on 38, 39, 40. We're rolling right through them right now. So we're making an attempt, making an attempt, making an attempt, fail, 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 and check that out. We have a success. This is what it was successful off of. Username Tomcat, password Tomcat. It took 49 of 55 attempts for us to get there. This was the address we were trying on, 8180. So it seems that we may have found some credentials that work. Let's head back over here to our Apache Tomcat. Something else you notice that might be really bad configuration. This guy's still sitting at a login prompt. He should have logged out. He should have forced the session to end. Tomcat, okay. Wow. We just gained access to the administration of their web server. Pretty scary. And we can come back one more time and see if we can take this exploit just a little bit further. Let's search Tomcat out one more time. So we searched Tomcat. Here's all of our different options that we have access to. This time we're actually going to come down here and we're going to use this exploit multi HTTP Tomcat Manager Deploy. And this has a rating of excellent. And it tells us what we're going to do. Tomcat Manager Application Deployer Authenticated Code Execution. So let's switch our exploit by typing in use exploit multi HTTP Tomcat Manager Deploy. Hit enter. Now you can notice that our MSF prompt has changed from an auxiliary now to an exploit. Next thing, let's show our options that we have available. It's not required, but we can set a password here. We do need to set an rhost. We have a port available to us. We have a username, as well as a vhost if it's a HTTP server virtual host. We are interested in setting our rhost to 192.168.40.130. We are interested in setting our R port to 8180. We are interested in setting our password to the password we were able to brute force. And we also want to set our username to the username we were able to brute force. Everything looked like it's set properly. Let's go ahead and show our options one more time. Our password is now stated as Tomcat, and our username. We're going to connect to this address on this port. Let's set a payload this time. And you can show your payloads. I'm just going to give you one to pick. We're going to use a Java payload. We're going to look for a interpreter session. And it's going to be a bind TCP. Go ahead and hit enter, and at this point in time you can exploit this target, and let's see what we got. This is a great result for us to get because this is not success. When we get to this point right here, there's something that we did not set properly, or there's something we did not do properly. One thing that was not listed up here but is required is a lhost. So let's come back down here and let's set lhost back to our address, hit enter, and now let's try to exploit one more time. Now you'll notice that we actually have an interpreter session. Here's what happened. This guy was starting a bind handler. It was attempting to automatically select a target. It found it. It was a Linux x86 system. It was uploading the WAR file. It was trying to execute JavaScript, and it began this undeploying process, but an interpreter session could not start because the bind TCP needs to understand what the actual port is from our target system, our local host. We've seen our host, remote host. This is our local host. For this particular exploit, this must be set as well. We did not see that listed up here, and you're going to run into that from time to time. But a way to avoid that is once you do this set payload, show your options one more time, because remember, your payload can now invoke options. It's a good learning process for us to go through. We now have a interpreter session right here, and you can simply type shell, and now if this looks familiar to you, we have a shell prompt from this system available to us. You can do a pwd. That's your print working directory command. Where are we working from? We're working from the root prompt. Who am I? Tomcat 55. Uname A. This is the system that we're connected to at this point in time. Tons of fun things you can do with Meterpreter. Play around with it. Tons of fun things you can do once you gain this root access as well. You type exit. It'll dump you out of your shell prompt back to your Meterpreter session. We'll get into Meterpreter a little bit more in further labs. At this point in time, we can exit. That'll close out that Meterpreter session. If you want to play around in there, play around for a while. But we are done. I'm going to exit out. I'm going to power off. That guy's going to shut down. I'll come back over here and shut this guest down as well. And success again. Good job.